Today's message is entitled, The Jesus Difference. And I invite you to find a Bible and turn to John chapter 13. Pastor Blake mentioned the wonderful weather lately, and I think that when weather gets good, I start to think about nature. How about you? I start to look outside, and I feel the presence of God in a unique way when I see the beautiful things He's made. And I want to talk about a creature, one of the amazing creatures of nature that lives in our region. It's a small creature. In fact, it only weighs about 3 milligrams or less. It's fantastic detail that God has put in even the smallest of creatures. Now, 3 milligrams is about a tenth of the weight of a long grain piece of rice. It's a tiny little creature. This little creature, though it is tiny, it has amazing capacities. Some even argue that it can see color because it seems to be attracted to certain colors. So those eyes that are about the size of a speck of dust that you see in the sunlight can see color from a great distance away. This little creature also has chemical sensors that make it possible for it to detect lactic acid and carbon dioxide from as much as 100 feet away. It's incredible. It can also sense heat. And it has these tiny wings that are thinner than the pages of your Bible, and in those wings there's this complex vascular system powered by its little heart that's smaller than a grain of sand. It's an incredible creature, but you don't like it. It's the mosquito. And why don't you like that amazing creature? Because of its social habits. That's why. Bzzz. But as I think about that mosquito, I think about some of the people that I've known in my life. And I'm not talking about any of you. Am I sure? Let me think about it. No, I'm sure. Let's leave it there. And I want you to catch this. I have known a lot of nasty people in my life, and I've known a lot of amazing people in my life, and oftentimes they're the same people. You get what I mean? When I was a kid, about 10 years old, in my scout club, Pathfinder Club, there was a boy there. And for some reason, he targeted me. He was about my age. He wasn't the most popular kid. He wasn't even a bully. But for some reason, whenever I would walk into the room, he would grab my arms and tug on me and say, "Jimmy!" And he would talk in this whiny voice, and then he would make up riddles or rhymes about me. It was weird. I didn't like the kid at all. He was annoying. What do you do? As I grew up, of course, I met other people that I found equally annoying, kind of like that little, mosquito. Bzzz, you want to swat it, right? When I went through college, of course, college was good, and there were some people there, but that was enough of a pool of social options that I could hang out with the people I liked. And so it wasn't until I got out to my job, which happened to be pastoring, so that's a bit more complicated socially, right? That I started to run into some other people. And I remember this one lady in my first district, and I didn't have any problem with her, but I kept hearing the stories. Here I was, a new pastor with my great answers to the problems the church had for the last 100 years, because I'd just been to college and they had taught me what the answers were. And I'd gotten out to this district, and I was trying to build something amazing, and this one lady's name kept coming up. She keeps driving people away. Someone would say, "Well, I used to volunteer for that, but then she said this." I'm like, what's going on there? I'm trying to build something. What are you doing to me? And another person, and pretty soon I look around and I realize that half the people who don't want to volunteer for ministry anymore don't because of this person. What do? That's annoying. It's like that bzzz, right? Is that okay to say? Bzz. You all got kind of quiet, like that was awkward. It probably is. Well, later on, I could think of other people, too. I remember one particular lady. I'd shown up at a different church. It was my second district, and the last pastor had been run out of town on a rail. Okay, he was my friend, good guy. Things hadn't gone well. He'd probably made a few mistakes, but very early on, this lady started to say things about me, not to me, but they came back to me. You know how that is, right? I'm talking in the pastoral context, but we all know what that's like. And as I'm trying to start, establish my credibility and build good relationships, this stuff keeps coming back. Like, what's going on here? It could really snowball. People start saying nasty things about me. They start a narrative, and then something else comes up, and then they read it through the glasses of that negativity, and so it's like, bzzz, go away. Nasty people. But what I said to you a minute ago is true. The nasty people are also some of the most wonderful people. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I'll mention one more, bzz, just so you can resonate, right? There was another person who had what I would call a very toxic theological perspective. Always into the conspiracy theories about the nasty things that are happening somewhere in the church, and he would always hint that I must be part of the conspiracy. Like, okay, fine. Yep, it's a secret conspiracy against you, so you better go away. No, didn't say that. But I labor with the guy. I try to reason with the guy, and it just didn't go away. What do you do? What do you do with these things? Do you swat the mosquito? Probably not. But what do you... Okay. Then, got it. All right. What do you do? Those people that make life difficult, what do you do with them? I know as I'm talking about these people that, by the way, I love each one of them. That's why I can talk about it. I didn't talk about the people that I don't love yet, okay? But as I talk about those examples, I am sure that you thought of somebody that has been in your life or might be in your life right now, and so it's a relevant question. What do we do with that? What do we do? And then there's that. As we look around our wonderful nation about now, it seems that there's plenty to be angry about, right? As you look at the political process and you see over the last week and a half, for your sake, I hope you haven't been paying attention because the personal insults have gotten very colorful between certain of these presidential candidates out there. And as they analyze why that's working so well to get notoriety, why insulting each other actually helps you to be supported in your aspiration for president of the United States, the analysis says it's because it's tapping into the anger Americans feel. We're angry about race. There's the Black Lives Matter movement, and then there's the counter movement. We're mad about jobs. We're mad about national security. We're mad about our freedoms. We're mad about social issues. We're angry as a people. And so an angry rhetoric stirs us up and causes us to vote. And in the midst of all that, we are Christians, right? Right? How is that going for you? The political rhetoric and the Christianity. How is that going? Now, I'm not picking on anyone in particular. I made myself a solemn vow that I wouldn't pick on any of these candidates or any of the particular positions, and I'm not trying to. But I just think that there is something in our Christianity that ought to guide us to a better place in all of that chaos than a secular person would come to. Am I right? I think so. Okay, hopefully. Let's be optimistic at least. So into that craziness and all of those mosquitoes that buzz around your life throughout the week, in all of the political rhetoric where candidates are hammering each other back and forth and making very colorful insults, into all of that this morning, Jesus speaks. And so I invite you to open his word and to explore the matter of the Jesus difference. What difference does Jesus make in all of these things? Now, maybe it sounds like a pretty basic question, but I have a hunch we need to think about it a bit more often. The Jesus difference. What difference does Jesus make in my marriage? The neighbor guy doesn't know Jesus and his marriage seems to be going okay. What difference does Jesus make in my workplace? My atheist coworker is a nice guy. Of course, I don't have an atheist coworker. That would be awkward in my profession. I'm kind of speaking for you, maybe, okay? And especially not here. Pastor Blake, Pastor Marcy, they check out. It's good. It's good. What difference does Jesus make? In John chapter 13, the situation was very much like we find our situation today, at least in terms of the anger. The disciples of Jesus were looking forward to the kingdom that they believed he was going to build on the earth. They were very short-sighted. Instead of a kingdom of eternity, they saw a temporary one. And so they were jockeying for the highest position in that kingdom. It says that night, as Jesus meets with his disciples here, recorded in John chapter 13, they had been debating about who was the greatest, which sounds kind of silly and almost cartoonish, but, as we look at our political process, I get it now. And then on top of that, you had Peter. Peter, who thought he was loyal, but was very soon to betray his master when his skin was in the game. There was Judas, who had already plotted with the enemies of Christ to destroy him. This was the context in which Jesus was speaking that night. And into the midst of that chaos, that hatred, that bad social interaction, those buzzing mosquitoes, Jesus said this. John 13:34 and 35. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Say what? We were just over here having a discussion about your cabinet positions. What did you say? I said, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. And Judas glances his way, and he glances back, and the look in his eyes models what he's talking about. Love. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Somebody that night was listening well enough to write it down. The Apostle John at least took mental note, and he wrote it down for us later, but I wonder how it fell on that crowd. Love one another. All right, yes, that's why you should put me in charge, because I'm going to spread love around. So get out of my way. Okay. And then Jesus went on to be specific about it. He talked about how the Gentiles, the rulers of the Gentiles, lord their power over each other. But he says, it shall not be so among you. The particular translation, application of it is, you've got to serve one another from the heart. Don't seek the highest spot. He also talked in the following chapters about important concepts like the presence of the Spirit. How do we love one another? We invite the Spirit in. And the Spirit will guide you, he says. And then in chapter 15, he talks about the vine and the branches. And he says, you can't bear fruit by yourselves. I've just told you to love one another, and you can't do that by yourselves. So stay connected with me. I'm the vine. Stay connected. And you can bear this fruit I'm talking about. You see, he was talking about the Jesus difference. This strange concept that if you and I are Christians, we respond to other people differently. So do we? Maybe I should say it this way, that because you and I are Christians, we should respond to other people differently. Now, I'm not for a minute arguing for passivity. In this political debate, maybe we Christians should jump right in there and engage in the debate. But I think that debate might take a different tone than the rest. Jesus not only talked about it, he also modeled it. If you just flip through the book of John there, you see there in chapter 2 his first miracle. The situation was that somebody had messed up. It was an embarrassment to the family. They had this grand wedding feast and they were out of wine. The most basic provision for the wedding feast was a good beverage, and the next was good food, and they had run out of wine. They had planned poorly. Somebody had messed up. But instead of calling them out and saying, you need to do better next time, they already knew that. Jesus performed this miracle and created water from wine, and that was the Jesus difference. Water from wine, wine from water. So, all right, thanks. Thanks for keeping me on track. Yes, and then in chapter 4, the woman at the well, that Samaritan woman, Jesus pushed past the social prejudice, potentially cutting off his own political advancement to talk to a woman in public. And not only that, a Samaritan. They were on the wrong side of the theological tracks and the ethnic tracks and all the bad stuff. And Jesus pushed past that to show her love. And it says that she then went and shared that love with those in the city, and a whole crowd came out and listened to him, and they experienced God because of Jesus' love. That's the Jesus difference. He modeled it for us. Pushed past someone's mistake. He pushed past the ethnic and theological bias. And we see the stories, we could list a lot of them. There's the case of the woman who was caught in the very act of adultery. She was clearly wrong. And what did Jesus do to call out her sin? By the way, he did call out her sin. But how did he do it? Instead of publicly condemning her, he said, all of you who are condemning her, take stock of your own lives. And when they left, he said, as for you, I don't condemn you, but go and sin no more. And it was the love extended to somebody who had messed up badly that empowered her to live a new life. That's the key. Love makes a difference. The Jesus difference. The Jesus difference. You know, as I think about the various endeavors we undertake in life, we have a bunch of people here who are married, right? Who's married here? That's a major endeavor. It's a good one. But it's an endeavor. And we have parents here. How many of you are parents? Young children, old children, doesn't matter, okay? That's another big endeavor. It takes a lot out of you, doesn't it? How many of you here, yes, okay. How many of you here have a job of some kind? All right. How many of you have had a job in some sense? Okay. That's another endeavor. You talk about 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, 80 hours, whatever it is. That takes a lot of your time. Major endeavor. We look at this church. We're actually having a worship service. It makes it kind of awkward to analyze it while it's going on, but, that takes a lot of work. We've got our tech crew back there. We've got people videoing it, catching every mistake I make about water and wine on video, and then it's going to go to the TV station. It'll be on YouTube. We had a lot of practice go into our music today. Some great talent there. But I've been through a lot of programs, and it seems that sometimes you can have all the technical stuff right in the worship service. You can have all the stuff right in your in your job and get all the stuff on the to-do list done. You can check off all the boxes in your marriage, and you can make sure you've read all the right parenting books and done all the right things. But there's sometimes when it works and sometimes when it doesn't. Am I right? And I'm suggesting to you today that in our broken world, it doesn't fix everything. But the Jesus difference, the love he calls us to insert into every area of our lives, does make a difference. You can check the boxes in your marriage and bring home flowers or pick up the dirty laundry off the floor or whatever it might be. But there's something that happens when there's a real love sense there. In parenting as well, you can have all the right structures and all the right rules and have clear expectations, but there's something when joy just bubbles out of parent and child that makes that work when it works well. It's love. It's the Jesus difference. And although every human being has the capacity to love, I want to suggest that, or not suggest, I want to contend, argue, establish that love, whether it comes from an atheist or a Christian, is always a gift from God. Just like every heartbeat is a gift from the Creator as well. But when we catch on that this is a gift from God and God wants to fill us with more love, there's a potential here in our lives that comes from our Christianity. And I want us to reach it. You know, as we look at church life as well, it certainly applies. This local congregation, I know not everybody here is from the local congregation. You can think of your own setting as well. But this local congregation has been a lot about putting on excellent programs. And that excellence is a great thing in that it draws people, right? All of us want to be part of something that matters. We want to invest our energies in something that really matters, that we can be proud of. Good. But there are two ways to pursue that excellence. One is this, and I want you to tell me if you think it's a good one or not. One way to pursue excellence is to say, if you can't do it right, get out of the way. Does that sound like the Jesus difference? No. Another much more beautiful way to pursue excellence is to say, we can do this together. Let me help you succeed. When you mess up, yeah, I'll call you out, but you know I love you, and I just want you to get better. As we look at ministry endeavors, the thing that makes it succeed is not having the right program or not having it perfect. The thing that makes it succeed is when we love each other and that love is shared with those who encounter that ministry. Amen. That's the Jesus difference. So it applies to our marriages, to our parenting, to our workplace, to our church. It is the difference. And I don't know what else to say, honestly. As I read the story, I see that at the center of what Jesus communicated to his disciples that evening was love. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. It's pretty straightforward. But how do we do it? Well, he says something in there about the presence of the Spirit. Have you invited the Spirit to help you be more loving today? I encourage you to do it. He says something in there about staying connected to the vine. He's the vine, and we're just the branches. We take all our nutrients from him, and if we do that, then we bear good fruit. This fruit, the fruit that looks like love, that is love. Have you connected with Jesus in a personal encounter yet today? It's the Jesus difference. It brings success to your church. It brings success to your families. It brings success to even your career. But when we forget it, that's when we run into trouble. And it works. I told you about those 4 examples of people that, that I called horrible people, didn't I? Or nasty, that's the word I used. Well, that kid I encountered when I was 10 years old in Pathfinder Scout Club, he was annoying me because he was hanging on my arms and he was making up rhymes about me, and he was teasing me. It was obvious. And he had this whiny voice, and it was just terrible. But one day I was talking to my big brother. He was 12, so he knew stuff. And he said, what you need to do is heap coals of fire on his head. Well, it comes from Proverbs. The idea is you return kindness for the opposite of that. And it's like heaping coals of fire on the person's head. So, all right. Wasn't quite convinced by the rhetoric that was actually equivalent to heaping coals of fire on the head, but I decided, okay, I'll talk to the guy. I'll just be his friend. I'll invite him to play with me next time. And I did. And just like a switch flipping, everything smoothed out. Whoa. And he became one of my better friends. That's the Jesus difference. So kids, if you have some person at school that's annoying you, I want to encourage you to do the same thing. Show them kindness, show them love, and see if you can experience the Jesus difference. So I think of that lady that I mentioned in my first pastoral district who seemed to be driving all the volunteers away. One day I finally got up the courage to go out and visit her at her house. And I sat down with her and I asked her about her experience with the church and the years she had been there, and she talked about the days gone by when she used to host church socials out at her house, and she could use her gift of hospitality. And how they would even sometimes have outdoor church out at her farm there. And so I said, hey, why don't we do that again? And she just lit up. And so we started having a few things at her house, and now she felt like she mattered again. And suddenly all of those stories of people driven away by this critical lady, they just evaporated. It's the Jesus difference. You show a little love, and that empowers the best in other people. You know, I've found it quite fascinating to see how often we forget that as human beings and as Christians. That love is empowering and criticism is not. Somebody who becomes compliant because they've been defeated is no substitute for somebody who is living out the image of God because they're encouraged and empowered by love and affirmation. There was that other lady in my second district who kept sharing these stories about me. And I tried to take the lesson from the first story, and I tried to go talk to her. It didn't really go anywhere. No, I haven't been saying that. But like 5 people said you did. Okay. I couldn't make any headway, but she joined a Christian ladies' book group, and they started to read books on the love of God. She told me about this later, and I started to notice a change. And when it finally came time for me to leave that place 6.5 years later, she and I cried together at goodbye. It's the Jesus difference. In that case, it wasn't me getting through, it was God getting through directly through another source. But when someone experiences God's love, it changes everything. And that other guy who was all into the conspiracies and figured I was part of it, one day I called him on it. I said, come on, you keep saying this stuff to me, but that's not fair. I've only been nice to you. And he said, yeah, that's true. Nothing really changed much. We didn't go out of our way to hang out together, but I did notice in a little while his Facebook posts started to change. And they started to be about God's love and God's goodness. And his behavior began to change. And instead of being the guy who was leading out in ministries in the church whose messes I had to keep cleaning up because he kept offending people, he became a real leader that people wanted to work with. And again, it was understanding God's love for himself allowed him to share it with others. It's the Jesus difference. And so when Jesus said in John chapter 13, by this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. It is my prayer today that describes us. that it's such a visible difference. That someone we interact with at work, or perhaps our spouse, or perhaps our child, or our parent can say, something's different about you. It seems that Jesus got through to you. That's what I pray. But the truth is, every single one of us comes here imperfect as Christians. As we've talked about those other people and the nasty things they did, and how we wanted to just swat that mosquito, I suspect that most of us, we're pretty honest with ourselves when we're at church at least, right? Most of us said, you know what, I could do better on this too. And so I want to encourage you right now. I'm going to share a video. It's just a 2-minute video. It's reflection time. It's not so much that the video itself is profound. It's that I want to create a space for you to talk to God. And the video, I guess, is profound because there's a chapter in the Bible that's all about love. What chapter? Somebody know that? 1 Corinthians 13. That's what it is. And it's the Apostle Paul, who also struggled and had some fights with other ministry professionals at his time, in the most eloquent terms expressed what Jesus was talking about here in John 3. And I want to invite you to do one of two things, or both, as we watch that video. I want you to talk with God about experiencing His love more fully for yourself, and or talk with God about how you can be better in expressing His love to others. Can we do that for the next 2 minutes? All right. Let's speak with Him now.